So we have the Mishnah and the oral source of it that predates Islam by at least a couple hundred years, where even if the writing of the Targum itself is contemporary to Mohammad, this could just be evidence of him copying from earlier Jewish history. The Targum goes through and it's written and compiled from earlier sources, and then the Quran copies it. So this is just straight literary dependence in the eternal speech of Allah on Jewish sources. The problem is, with all of this story is false. Solomon didn't do this. He didn't speak to birds, he didn't speak to animals. The Ring of Solomon is folklore. So if the history, the context, and the information within it is false, it's plagiarized from an earlier Jewish source, yet it's in the eternal speech of Allah as if it's true, what does that mean? It means the Quran is false, or at least it contains false information, which then contradicts its claim to both clarity, preservation, and truthfulness. So in this video, we're going to be going through Surah 27 because I did a stream on this recently. Check it out here. And we just went through the entire Surah and we were showing how that single Surah disproves Islam in so many different ways. There's so many problems with Surah 27. In this video, I want to just tackle in on one issue within Surah 27, which is the issue of plagiarism, specifically the plagiarism of Solomon's story. There's other plagiarism as well, but I want to focus in on Solomon's story because Quran is supposed to be the eternal divine word of Allah. There's not supposed to be any errors in it, any problems in it, any historical errors. Yet there is this historical error within Surah 27 that is based on previous writings of Jews. So we have plagiarism that disproves Islam. So we're going to read through the Surah, and we're going to read through what's called Targum Sheni, or the second Targum of Esther. They're synonymous. So we're going to read through that, and then I'm going to highlight them, and then I'm going to feed it to AI to see what AI thinks about this as well. So let's jump into it. And indeed we gave knowledge to David and Solomon, and they said, Praise be to Allah, who has preferred us above many of his believing slaves. And Solomon was David's heir, and he said, O mankind, indeed we have been taught the language of birds, and have been given of all things. This is surely an obvious favor. So Solomon can speak bird, okay? And there were gathered together to Solomon his armies of the jinn, mankind, of birds, and they will set in battle order. Okay, so we had three different armies of spirit beings, jinn, of humanity, and of animals, until when they reached the valley of ants, an ant exclaimed, O ants, enter your dwelling so that Solomon and his armies do not crush you without realizing it. And he smiled, laughing at her speech, and said, My lord, make me thankful for your favor with which you have favored me and my parents, and to do good that will be pleasing to you, and include me among your righteous slaves. And he searched among the birds and said, How is it that I do not see the hoopoe, or is he among the absent? Now, the hoopoe is kind of very interesting and important here because of the similarities with the Targum. Here's a hoopoe. It's adorable. Indeed, I will punish him with hard punishment, or indeed I will kill him. So he's going to kill the hoopoe for being absent, okay? This is just after Allah praised him for being the most righteous person possible, or indeed he will bring me a clear excuse. But he was not long in coming, and he said, I have found out what you do not understand, and I come to you from Sheba with sure news. So now, even though Solomon was given all knowledge from Allah, he apparently didn't know that the Queen of Sheba existed. I know that might be a contradiction, but here we have an interesting thing. He is going to punish him with a hard punishment, which in the tafsir is talking about how he's going to rip out his feathers and beat him. So we have this very violent punishment for a bird that was just absent to battle formation, but he's not actually going to battle. He just assembled his army. The bird was late, and he said he's going to torture him. So the Islamic Solomon is quite evil, yet he is called righteous with David. Make me thankful for your favor, which you have favored me and my parents, to do good and pleasing to you, and include me among your righteous slaves. So it goes immediately from Solomon being a righteous slave to him threatening to torture a bird for being late. That's interesting. Why include that? There's a reason for it. Indeed, I have found a woman ruling over them, and she has been given all things, and hers is a mighty throne. I found her and her people worshipping the sun instead of Allah, and Satan makes their work seem good to them, and bars them from the way, so they are not guided. So they do not worship Allah, who brings forth the hidden in the heavens and the earth, and knows what you conceal and what you proclaim. Allah, there is no God except him, the Lord of the mighty throne. He said, we will see whether you speak truth, or whether you're among the liars. So he's not believing the bird yet. Go away with this letter and throw it down to them, and then turn away and see what they return. She said, O chieftains, indeed, there has been thrown to me a noble letter. Indeed, it is from Solomon, and indeed it is in the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful. So now she knows that Allah is compassionate and merciful, which is hilarious. Do not exalt yourselves against me, but come to me as Muslims. She said, O chieftains, pronounce for me in my case. I decide no case until you are present with me. They said, we are lords of might and lords of great powers, but it is for you to command, so consider what you will command. She said, indeed, kings, when they enter a township, will ruin it and make the honor of its people shame. They will do this, but indeed I am going to send a present to them and see what the messengers return. So when he came to Solomon, he said, what? Would you help me with wealth? But what Allah has given me is better than what he has given you. No, it is you who rejoice in your gift. So he's asking her to become a Muslim, as Ibn Kathir states here. So return to them, and we indeed will come to them with armies that they cannot resist, and will drive them out from there with shame, and they will be humiliated. He said, O chiefs, which of you will bring me her throne before they come to me as Muslims? In Ifrit, this is Persian, among the jinn said, I will bring it to you before you can rise from your place. Indeed, I am truly strong and trustworthy of such work. One with whom was knowledge of the book said, I will bring it to you before your gaze returns to you. And when he saw it set in his presence, he said, this is of the bounty of my Lord, that he may test me whether I give thanks or am ungrateful. Whoever gives thanks only gives thanks for his own soul, and whoever is ungrateful, indeed my Lord is absolute in independence, bountiful. This is a contradiction of the Quran, but he said, disguise her throne for her, so that we may see whether she will be guided or be among those who are not rightfully guided. So when she came, it was said, is your throne like this? She said, as if it were the very one, and we were given knowledge before her, and we became Muslims. Okay. And what she was inclined to worship instead of Allah hindered her, for she came from disbelieving people because she worshipped the sun. It was said to her, enter the hall, and when she saw it, she thought it was a pool and bared her legs. He said, indeed, it is a hall made smooth of glass. She said, may Allah, my Lord, indeed I have wronged myself, and I submit with Solomon to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. So she becomes a Muslim. And this is a very strange story. Just in general, you have Solomon being able to speak to birds, being able to speak to ants, listening to ants, and then he praises Allah for giving him such wisdom and knowledge. And there's something interesting to note. Solomon is the only king in the Bible that lived in peace his entire life. God said that he explicitly gave Solomon peace as a reward for building the temple, as being a faithful servant to him. So Solomon is the only king in the Bible that knew peace, and he is portrayed in the Quran as this violent warlord conquering. Wild. Very, 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 very wrong-handed. It's not all what the Bible is claiming, not all what history shows. So we see this anachronism with the Persian name of the jinn, where Persia didn't exist yet. So how could Solomon have a jinn who had a Persian name? Anyway, we also see contradictions with other parts of the Quran, so we see a lot of problems in this section. The biggest problem, though, is plagiarism. So if we read this exact same passage from the Targum that it's based on, you'll notice a lot of similarities. So this is on Sephira.com or .org, and this is going through the Queen of Sheba with the various sources from the Jewish literature. Although the Gemara is adamant that the Queen of Sheba is not real, not a real person, there are many other Jewish sources that do not agree. Among them is Sheni Lachot Habrit, which says, yada yada yada, when the King Solomon ascended the throne of Israel and the glory of Israel was at its height, kings from all over the world came to bring presents to him, and he inherited the crown of every domain, including the domains ruled over by the various demons. According to a version in the Targum of Sheni of the Book of Esther, Solomon sent a threatening letter to the Queen of Sheba, warning her if she would not come and submit to his rule, he would dispatch all kinds of demons who would kill her while she was asleep. So this is the legend of the Jews, which is quoting from Targum of Sheni. Solomon, must be remembered, bore rule not only over men, but also over the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the demons, spirits, and the specters of the night. So these are essentially jinn. So he has jinn that he is commanding. He also has birds and beasts, demons, and specters of the night. And in Tafsir Jalalain, we have, to get a look at the queen's legs, she was told, enter the courtyard, which was paved with transparent crystal, under which were flowing fresh water and fish. Solomon had it constructed where he had been told that her legs and feet were like those of a donkey. But when she saw it, she supposed it to be a pool and bared her legs ready to enter it. Solomon was on his throne in the center of the courtyard, and he saw that her legs and feet were beautiful. He said to her, it is a courtyard paved with glass, and invited her to Islam. Solomon wanted to marry marry her, but disliked the hair on her legs, and so the shaitans that he commanded prepared a debilatory, which is like a nair, it's hair removal, and she removed the hair with it. He married her and loved her and confirmed her as the ruler over her kingdom. It also comes from the Jewish sources. So we get in the Jewish sources that Solomon received help from Satans because he had this ring that was magical that he used to control everything. So this gets into a lot of Jewish folklore that is also adopted by the Arabs and the Muslims. So this folklore has the Ring of Solomon. So the context of this background is the Ring of Solomon and Mishnah and various other commentaries that come about in the 400s, 500s, and 600s. So right before the time of Mohammad is whenever this was written. So what we're reading right now is at least 100 years older than Surah 27. Just keep that in mind. So Solomon must be remembered, bore not only rule over the men, but also over the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the demons, spirits, and specters of the night. He knew the languages of all of them, and they understood his language. So he was Dr. Doolittle. When Solomon was of good cheer, by reason of wine, he summoned the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the creeping reptiles, the shades, the specters, and the ghosts, to perform their dances before the kings, his neighbors, whom he invited to witness his power and greatness. So now he's prideful and boastful, and he's drunk. So interesting things to note. And the king's scribes called the animals and spirits by name, one by the other, and they all assembled of their own accord without fetters or bonds, with no human hand to guide them. So they were assembling not as an army, but to get together to dance before the king, and he is drinking wine. So the Quran changes this quite clearly to make it into assembling them as an army. So this is a departure from the original source material, but we still have the jinn, mankind, and birds coming together. So we have the birds, the specters and shades, and then mankind as well, performing dances before the kings. So the reason why this wouldn't be included in the Quran is because you can't sing music, you can't dance, that's haram, and you can't drink wine, that's haram as well. So the context of this passage, why they're coming together as a troop, is missing because it's not Islamic. So they're taking what fits with Islam, and then they're discarding and altering what doesn't fit. This is clear signs of plagiarism and adaptation. On one occasion, the hoopoe, again the bird, the specific type of bird, was missing from among the birds. He could not be found anywhere. The king, full of wrath, ordered him to be produced and chastised for his tardiness, literally like tortured. The hoopoe appeared and said, O Lord, King of the world, incline thine ear and hearken to my words. 3 months have gone by since I began to take counsel with myself and resolve upon a course of action. I have eaten no food and drunk no water in order to fly about the whole world and see whether there is a domain anywhere which is not subject to my lord the king. So now he is like this warlord. So it's actually fitting way better with Islamic history of Solomon than it is biblical history of Solomon, because the Jews like to wildly change things. And I found the city of Kitor in the east. Dust is more valuable than gold there, and silver is like the mud on the streets. Its trees are from the beginning of time, and they all suck up water that flows from the Garden of Eden. The city is crowded with men. On their heads they wear garlands wreathed in paradise in Eden. They know not how to fight, nor how to shoot with bow and arrow. The ruler is a woman. She is called the Queen of Sheba. If now it please thee, O Lord and King, I shall gird my loins like a hero and journey to the city of Qatar in the lane of Sheba. Its kings I shall fetter with chains, and its rulers with iron bands, and bring them all before my Lord the King. So we have similar type of language about paradise in the Quran, with it being the Garden of Eden, which is interesting. The hoopoe's speech pleased the king. The clerks of his land were summoned, and they wrote a letter and bound it to the hoopoe's ring. The bird rose skyward, uttered his cry, and flew away, followed by the other birds. This actually makes more sense than the Quran's version. So when we're reading the original, it's actually way more readable, it makes more sense, and it works. This is actually one of the evidences for adaptation, is if you think your audience is familiar with the source material, you will just quickly summarize, or you will do like the highlights of a passage, and you won't quote the whole thing, because you're expecting them to be familiar with the story. Here we have the Quran expecting the people to be familiar with the original story, so he's not actually quoting it in detail. He's giving a summarized version. So the version within the Targum is actually a little bit longer, although there's a lot more added material to the Quran for this passage. So here we have, and they came to Kitar in the land of Sheba. It was morning, and the queen had gone forth to pay worship to the sun. Suddenly the birds darkened his light. The queen raised her hand and rent her garment and was sore astonished. Then the hoopoe alighted near her. Seeing that a letter was tied to his wing, she loosed it and read it, and what was written in the letter. From me, King Solomon, peace be with thee, peace be with thy nobles of thy realm. So this might be like where they're getting the greeting that they do, the peace be unto you. So there's lots of that stuff in the Talmud and in the Jewish sources. They probably are getting the peace be with thee from the Jews. It's not an original thing with Islam. Know that God has appointed me king over the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the demons, the spirits, and all specters. All of the kings of the east and the west come to me with greetings. If thou wilt come and salute me, I will show thee great honor, more than any of the kings that attend me. But if thou wilt not pay homage to me, I will send out kings, legions, riders against thee. Thou asked, who are these kings, legions, riders of the king Solomon? The beasts of the field are my kings, the birds are my riders, the demons, spirits, and shades of the night are my legions. The demons will throttle you in your beds at night, while the beast will slay you in the field, and the birds will consume your flesh. Pretty gruesome. And we see here that it lines up more with the Islamic Solomon. He's threatening her. He's forcing her to convert, essentially, or to come subject to him. When the Queen of Sheba had read the contents of the letter, she again rent her garment, and she sent word to the elders and her princes, know you not what Solomon has written to me? They answered, we know nothing of King Solomon, and his dominion we regard as naught. But their words did not reassure the queen. She assembled all the ships of the sea and loaded them with the finest kinds of wood and with pearls and precious stones. Together with these she sent Solomon 6,000 youths and maidens, born in the same year, in the same month, on the same day, in the same hour, all of equal stature and size, clothed in purple garments. So this is kind of a nonsense statement. There's 6,000 people born on the same day in her territory. That's kind of crazy. She'd have to have like a population of billions to accomplish that naturally, unless they deliberately plan all their births to be at the same time, which is strange. Anyway, there's this embellishment that's happening that's kind of insane. They bore a letter to King Solomon as follows: from the city of Ketor to the land of Israel is a journey of 7 years, as is thy wish, and behest that I visit thee. I shall hasten and be in Jerusalem at the end of 3 years. So it's going to take 7 years to get there, or I'm going to be there in 3. So there's this escalation and this hyperbole, and this, it's just it reads very much like a Mishnah. So the Quran copies this Mishnah very, very close. We're not actually finished with all the copies. But you can see already, like, there's so much of this that there's just one for one copying, which is crazy. If the Quran is supposed to be the eternal speech of Allah, why is Allah using folklore of Jews that's not even true? He's using false folklore of Jews as if it's true. Why? Continuing on. So according to the Targum, it's not actually quoting it here, the Queen of Sheba was a queen who was basically forced to submit to Solomon due to his power over the demons. Before she would agree to submit to Solomon, she needed proofs of his divine wisdom. This is why she comes with questions to challenge Solomon. After he answers her questions, she praises Hashem, so she converts Solomon and the Jews for their wisdom and goodness, and agrees to give tribute to Solomon, Shlomo, because his name comes from peace. In Kabbalah and the Zohar, based on Targum Erev, the Queen of Sheba is not identified as a person, but as the queen of demons, Lilith. Otherwise, she's a sorceress or a demonic seductress. That gets into the reason why he wanted to marry her in the Quran, is because in various other Jewish sources, he did marry her, or she seduced him, including, like, they had intercourse. And in the lost midrash that is often quoted by early sources, Solomon convinced the queen to convert to Judaism and married her, but was not able to convince her to stay. She ended up going back to her country, and she was pregnant, and then starting with various sources like Surah ben Sirah, this child was either Nebuchadnezzar or the ancestor of Nebuchadnezzar. So we have, again, them getting married, which is in the Islamic sources, her converting to Judaism, just like she converts to Islam, and then her going back to her own kingdom to rule it, as we see in the in the Quran. So then they debate about the kid, and then I want to read the next passage as well, because it is relevant. Benia conducted the queen to Solomon, who had gone to sit in a house of glass to receive her. The queen was deceived by an illusion. She thought the king was sitting in water, and so she stepped across to him to raise her garment to keep it dry. On her bared feet the king noticed hair, and he said to her, thy beauty is the beauty of a woman, but thy hair is masculine. Hair is an ornament to men, but it disfigures a woman. And she asked him questions, and it goes into the questions. These are actually really neat questions, but I don't want to go through it in this video. So we have that she's hairy. Well, in the sources, that's there. So we have that she lifted, and then she was wrong, and then she submitted, and she became a Muslim. Well, this only happened according to the Targum because she was hairy. But in Jalalain also uses this. It says that she had hair like a donkey. So we have the hair as well being copied. So much of this is directly from it. The entire background and history of the Quranic passage here comes from Jewish sources that predate it by a lot. So I wanted to compare these two things and go through all of the commonalities between them. So I highlighted everything that's similar or identical, and then everything that is not similar, I left blank. So we see like him drinking wine, them dancing, like the haram stuff wasn't included, and some of the details aren't included, even though the vast majority of it is. On the Quran side, so the right side is the Targum, the left side is the Quran, Surah 27. We see that anything that praises Allah, anything that makes him a Muslim, is the added stuff and the story of the ants. This appears to be an original to Islam, the story of the ants. So it might just be like proof, and then he uses it as proof of him being a servant of Allah. So him knowing about the ants is proof of him being a Muslim and being favored by God, by Allah. But you know, pretty much all of that is directly word for word from the rest of it. And then they don't worship Allah, so the bird is giving its report and it's saying that they're pagans. And then the bird itself is a Muslim, which gets into the Islamic view of animals will be judged according to their beliefs. So some animals in Islam will go to hell. This bird happens to be a Muslim, and this is the bird speaking. He says, Allah, there's no God except him, the Lord of the mighty throne. So the bird is worshiping Allah, and then Solomon doesn't believe the bird, and here Solomon does believe the bird. Here Solomon doesn't believe the bird. Just interesting. Makes Solomon a little bit more violent than the original sources. And then Solomon is like, hey, why are you giving me gifts that, you know, Allah is giving me a greater gift than what anything you can offer? So again, it is an apologetic. From the Islamic perspective, it's an apologetic. And then this whole issue about disguising the throne is entirely added. It throws in problems because it has a Persian name, which is an anachronism. And this is actually used, I don't remember if it's Kathir or Jalalan. One of the tafsirs talks about how this shows that the Queen of Sheba was of great knowledge and wisdom because she could discern that it was an illusion. It was her throne was just actually placed there. It was actually her throne. So it praises the Queen of Sheba with it. So whenever we see that like she bared her legs, the reason why it says this is because one of the sources in the Islamic sources says that she was hairy. The other one says that she wasn't hairy, and it was actually just to prove to Solomon that she was hairless. So you have an apologetic in the Quran, possibly, of her being hairless, and she wasn't actually hairy. It was just rumors that was to disparage her. And then you have the other one that says, no, she was hairy, but then the demons helped her get the hair off. Either way, they wed. So you don't get that in the original, and it praises the Queen of Sheba more so than what the original did. So she became a Muslim, and she worshipped her. So out of the 29 ayah in this passage about Solomon, 18 of them are directly taken from the Targum. So that is the majority, the vast majority. Hold on, let's get a percent real quick. 62% of this Quranic passage is taken almost verbatim from the Jewish sources. And then the rest of it is influenced by the Jewish sources other than the ant and the throne, which I could not find a source for. Those are the two original passages in this, and most of the other stuff is just about Islam, like the bird praising Allah, Solomon praising Allah, Queen of Sheba praising Allah, because everyone has to be a Muslim in the Quran. So we see here 62% is directly from that. So I was like, okay, I want to feed all of this knowledge, all this information to some AI and just see what they do. Because I ran it through some plagiarism detectors, and the AI ones were interesting. The other ones said that there were 100% independent, which is crazy to me. But because the wording is different and the structure is different, it doesn't actually detect plagiarism. So, you know, plagiarism detectors are not really all that great unless you're copying verbatim. It doesn't really detect things. The AI ones did detect things. I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I wanted to look at some popular AI, and I'm in incognito mode, so I don't have any cookies. The only one I'm logged into is ChatGPT because it forced me to do it. And I started with this with ChatGPT. I was like, okay, I'm gonna feed it these documents and see what it thinks. And it gave me a 2% independent rating and a 90% related rating. So okay, this thing clearly thinks that it is related, and it quotes the Solomon knowing the language of birds, commanding humans, birds, and jinn as his army, the hoopoe missing, and the news of the Queen of Sheba worshiping the sun, because that's in the original as well, a letter sent to her by the queen through the hoopoe, threatening her with force in the glass hall and bare legs. All of that is so specific that ChatGPT is like, yeah, no, this is like 100, like it's nearly 100% related. I was like, okay, would you say it's plagiarized? And then it says, no, it's not plagiarized because that's not how plagiarism works. It's definitely dependent, but it's not plagiarized. I was like, okay, which of these texts do you think is more likely to be the original? And then obviously ChatGPT knows things, so it is like, oh, this is Targum Sheni, and then the other one is Surah 27. Even though I said without looking up what the sources are from, either it looked at the names of the documents, which I probably shouldn't have had, or just it knows the sources. But it gives that Targum Sheni is dated to late antiquity, and it's compiled in the early 7th century, although scholars date anywhere from 4th century to 7th century because it includes other Christianisms and Greek and Roman influences. So for it to be in the 6th century after the Byzantines took over Rome, or at least the region, it would be unlikely for it to have so many things from full-on Holy Roman Empire type era. So there are good reasons to believe that the Targum predates the Quran, the Surah 27, by at least 100 years, if not 200 years or so. And it comes from Mishnah that was later written down into the Targum of Esther, the second Targum of Esther. So we have the Mishnah and the oral source of it that predates Islam by at least a couple hundred years, where even if the writing of the Targum itself is contemporary to Mohammad, which might actually be better evidence of direct dependence, like if he got his hands on this Targum, because he appears to have a Talmud because of how much he quotes from it. This could just be evidence of him copying from earlier Jewish history. So it's just oral history that is being written down into the Targum, and then he takes from the Targum and uses it in the Quran. And then it asked me, does it want to make a timeline? I said, yeah, sure, make a timeline. So then it says, okay, biblical base is like way in the past, and then the Jewish sources happen, and then the Targum was written, and then the Quran was written. So for sure, the Targum, and I'll let you read this, I'm not going to go through that. The Targum goes through, and it's written and compiled from earlier sources, and then the Quran copies it. So this is just straight literary dependence in the eternal speech of Allah on Jewish sources that are false. It's not even like the Quran quoting the Bible or using stories from the Bible or correcting the Bible. These are for sure false accounts that have anachronisms in it, so historical errors and contradictions, and it shows Solomon as this violent man whenever he was the most peaceful king in Jewish history. So it is entirely false information that is being copied from a Jewish source in the eternal speech of God. How can you believe this to be true? And then it said, do you think this is plagiarized story? It's saying, historically, no. And I was like, from a modern lens, would it be? And it says, from a modern lens, it would meet the definition of plagiarism because it is substantial overlash, no citation, and the chronology, like, it just predates it. Then I had to give me other things that would be plagiarism, which I'm going to go through with other videos. So I did that with ChatGPT, logged in. I was like, okay, let's do this with other AI, logged out, and see what it does. So I have, without looking up the sources from, give me a percentage chance of these two documents being independent. Which one do you think comes first? And if it came first by 100 years, if both are supposed to be independent from each other, would you consider this plagiarism by modern standards? Then I feed it the Surah, and then I feed it the Targum. So, the two documents describe highly overlapped narratives involving King Solomon, his command over birds, his interactions with the Queen of Sheba, a letter demanding submission, the transport of her throne, and a deceptive glass hall causes her to bare legs, revealing something unusual in the second document. Key shared elements include Solomon's ability to understand animal languages, the hoopoe's role as a scout delivering the news to the Queen of Sheba, the Queen's sun worship, her initial resistance followed by submission, and the supernatural feats like moving the throne instantly. However, the texts differ in style and details, the first is more concise, repetitive in phrasing, indeed used frequently because the Quran is stupid, and emphasizes monotheistic gratitude to a deity named Allah, with elements like jinn armies and a focus on righteousness. The second is more elaborate and folkloric, adding details like Solomon summoning creatures for dances, the hoopoe's extended speech, the queen of sending thousands of identically attired youths and maidens, a journey time frame, and a comment on the queen's hairy feet, while portraying Solomon's letter as more threatening. Now, mind you, the gifts are also mentioned in the Quran, and the hairy feet are mentioned in the tafsir. So, given the extensive thematic and sequential similarities, far beyond what coincidence would allow in independent accounts of a historical or legendary figure, I estimate only a 5% chance that these documents are truly independent. They appear to draw from a similar shared cultural narrative tradition, with one likely influencing the other or both expanding on a common archetype. Back solely on the textual styles, the second document strikes me as the earlier one, as a more mythical, embellished tone typical of oral legends and ancient folklore, whereas the first feels like a streamlined doctrinal retelling with added religious framing. If the later one appeared 100 years after the first one, both represented original independent works. I would not consider this plagiarism by modern standards, as the texts aren't verbatim copies, rather reinterpreted versions of the shared story, similar to how modern authors adapt public domain folklore without recrediting every prior iteration. However, if there are later author knowingly lifted unique phrases or structures without attributing to it in a context requiring originality, they could edge towards plagiarism territory, which it did. So this is saying, yes, it's edging towards plagiarism. So it thinks Targum Sheni was first based on its literary style and a 5% chance that it's truly independent. Let's see what Meta thinks. Based on the content style, I'd estimate the probability of these two documents being independent as follows. I'd give it a 20 to 30% chance of being completely independent. The similarities in the story and characters and specific details like the Hupu, the Queen of Sheba, and Solomon suggest a connection or shared roots. It appears that the first document, likely from Quran Surah, may have come first, given its more concise and direct narrative style. The second document, likely from a Jewish Midrash or the Talmud, seems to elaborate and expand on the story. The first document indeed came first by 100 years or more, and both are supposed to be independent. I'd consider it less likely to be plagiarism by modern standards. However, the similarities would still be notable and it would be dependent on the specific context of claims of influence and independence. Keep in mind, these documents likely are rooted in ancient traditions and storytelling, which often shared motifs and narratives. Without more information on the origin historical context, it's challenging to make a definitive judgment. So it recognizes the surah, and it recognizes that it's probably from a midrash, although it doesn't identify it. And then Meta says, based on the context of narrative similarities, there's a very high percentage chance, over 95%, that these two documents are not independent. They both tell the same core story of the King Solomon, the Hupu bird, the Queen of Sheba, including specific shared details like the Hupu's role as a messenger in the Queen's encounter with the glass floor or hall. I'd say the first document came first as a more concise, flowing narrative, with the second document style is more fragmented, numbering paragraphs in a more embellished folkloric feel. So it's interesting. Yes, if these plagiarism documents were published 100 years after the other second claim is independent, it would be absolutely considered plagiarism by modern standards. So Gemini thinks it's plagiarism, and it gives it a 95% chance of being dependent on each other. Meta gives 20 to 30% chance of them being independent. So there's a 80 to or 70 to 80% chance that they are dependent. So 70 to 80, 95%, 95% for Grok, and a 2% from ChatGPT. ChatGPT and Gemini both said that they are explicitly plagiarism by modern standards. Grok and Meta says that they wouldn't be plagiarism, and Grok and ChatGPT said that the Targum came first, and then Gemini and Meta says that the Quran came first. Now we have historical evidence that the Targum came first, and then they all say that there's a similar styling to them, which I think is interesting, but it says because it's more concise that the folklore expanded upon it rather than the folklore being original, and then the other one was a retelling. I think Grok has the best take on it, but either way, it's super interesting. No matter what AI you feed this to, it's like, yeah, that's obviously dependent. You're not going to get, oh no, this is independent. Yeah, of course. These two sources indeed came from, one of them from God and one of them from the Jews, who just so happened to receive revelation from God that it was the same. That's one possible solution to it. The problem is, with all of this story is false. Solomon didn't do this. He didn't speak to birds. He didn't speak to animals. The Ring of Solomon is folklore. So the entire background of this surah is false outright. So if the history, the context, and the information within it is false, it's plagiarized from an earlier Jewish source, yet it's in the eternal speech of Allah as if it's true. What does that mean? It means the Quran is false, or at least it contains false information, which then contradicts its claim to both clarity, preservation, and truthfulness. If it fails those, the Quran is false according to its own standards. So if the Quran is false, Islam is false. Muhammad is a false prophet. Islam is false. Let this be the proof to you that the Quran is a man-made document. Come to Christ. It's better over here. May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you always. Bless God, bless man. Amen.